Neuromuscular responses, control of movement. In order to move a muscle, the nervous system is key, as it interacts to control muscle movement from the very second the stimulus is detected. As stated, the process of muscle movement begins with the detected stimulus, likely from sight, however it could be any of the 5 senses. This stimulus is picked up and sent to the brain and the central nervous system, where the information is picked up. The brain then sends an action potential down the spinal cord and to a motor neuron, where it undergoes saltatory conduction. This happens through the action potential being forced to jump over the myelinated sheath placed on the axon, as they are made up of insulating cells, stopping depolarization from happening, to the nodes of Ranvier, as they are not myelinated, and therefore they are the only place where the wave of depolarization can happen. This increases the speed of the action potential, which allows for the overall muscle movement to occur faster. Once it has reached the end of the axon, it will arrive at the neuromuscular junction. This will cause the acetylcholine, which is a neurotransmitter, to travel down the vesicle until it reaches the presynaptic membrane. If enough ACH travels from the presynaptic membrane to the postsynaptic membrane, the sliding filament theory will occur, and the contraction will happen. However, if not enough passes over, no contraction will happen, due to the all or nothing law, stating that either all the fibers contract or none do. Motor unit recruitment. Motor unit recruitment is where additional motor units are supplied to allow a stronger contraction to occur and contribute to limiting fatigue, which would likely happen. There are 3 different types of motor units that can be recruited, which consist of slow oxidative, FOG, and fast glycolytic. Before a contraction, the tension in the muscle would be 0, and to increase the tension, motor units would be recruited. Initially, or in a small contraction, slow oxidative units would be recruited, and each would slowly increase the tension as they are added. However, at a point, the brain starts recruiting additional fast fatigue-resistant motor units, which can increase the tension even more until fast glycolytic motor units are recruited, that increases the tension by a large amount with each unit added. This would be orderly recruitment, as the units are working together to increase the size of the contraction in a way that they are all useful. For example, if slow oxidative units were recruited later in the process, they would have little use, as they only increase the tension by a small amount. These units can be used in different scenarios, as they all differ. For example, slow oxidative motor units may be used when standing or walking, as only small contractions are relied upon. However, during a high-intensity sport or weightlifting, fast glycolytic fibers may be used, as a larger contraction is needed. Slow oxidative are also the most fatigue-resistant, as they contain a lot of mitochondria, as opposed to fast fatigue motor units, which have little mitochondria and therefore fatigue quickly. FF units are the largest of the 3, due to them generating the largest force. The amount of motor units depends on the muscle, usually. However, in most cases, the more specific of a unit, the higher the tension, and therefore the stronger the contraction. Larger forces can also be generated through a second twitch that contracts the muscle again before it has the chance to relax, as there would be an increase in number of fibers. Both the muscle spindle apparatus and the Golgi tendon organs detect stretch and tension in the muscles. Firstly, the muscle spindle apparatus contain extrafusal fibers that contain actin and myosin and therefore allow for contractions. In between the 2 layers of extrafusal fibers is the intrafusal muscle fibers that cannot contract, as they have no actin or myosin, however instead detect the stretch in the muscle. These fibers are act with nerve fibers that are needed to send a signal up the spinal cord into the brain. The brain can then send an impulse down an alpha neuron that causes the muscle to contract and prevent it from stretching. This can be seen in the knee, for example, with the stretch reflex that is often tested and prevents the quadriceps and or hamstring from tearing. If the muscle spindle is stretched, it will send an impulse up the spinal cord to the brain, which will reply with an impulse down the motor unit, causing the muscle to contract and make the knee jerk. This can be used in the stretch cycle. This process can be used in the stretch cycle, which is an eccentric contraction followed by a concentric contraction that can be used to jump higher than usual, as the muscle will become compressed and therefore result in a larger force. This can also be used to make contractions stronger through plyometric training, as it quickly stretches and shortens the muscle over time. So over time, the spindles will stretch and the power of contractions will increase. The muscle is connected to the bone through a tendon, and within the tendon there is the Golgi tendon organ that detects tension in the muscle-tendon complex, which is important as it sends signals to the alpha motor neuron to the brain, from the alpha motor neuron to the brain, which relays the information that relaxes the muscle and decreases tension. This is the inverse stretch reflex, as for example, in the bicep, if a heavy weight was lifted, this organ would send a signal to the brain, which sends an impulse down a motor neuron, which would cause the muscle to relax and perhaps drop the weight or lower it by stretching the muscle, which would release the tension. To test the neuromuscular system, we carried out a Winget test as it measured the power produced by the muscle on a bike over 20 seconds. It is usual for the test student to produce their highest power early in the test and then drop off as the test progresses. The extent of this drop-off depends on the student, how much they have trained, and their genetics, as some people are born with better slow oxidative fibers and others with fast glycolytic. This is used once the stimulus is detected. Once the stimulus detected has been transferred to the brain, and the brain has produced an impulse that has been sent down a motor neuron. This is similar with this test, as the student begins the test at 465 watts, which is the minimum score produced over the test. As it is the beginning, it is likely slow oxidative fibers are being initially recruited. However, as shown in the graph, the power drastically increases early on, and as slow oxidative motor units contribute to the least power, it can be interpreted that fog and fast glycolytic motor units are being recruited to help create the strongest possible contractions. This rises the power to 942 watts, which is the peak power of the test, and is measured at 1.5 seconds. As this is the peak power, it suggests that from this point onwards, the fast glycolytic units may have fatigued, as they have the lowest fatigue resistance. This shows that during a maximum effort test, orderly recruitment does not really occur, as a contraction may become more reliant on the fast fatigue resistant units, despite it still recruiting some fast glycolytic units, which may be why the student's power slowly begins to fall at a fairly constant rate, however still remaining above the initial power. It is likely the student is born with slow oxidative units, as the power they created is fairly low, however they are able to maintain it throughout the test. Throughout the test, the spindle muscle fibers will also be sending impulses to the brain, causing the muscle to contract once it's sent back down a motor neuron, stopping the muscle from tearing as they cycle. As the neuromuscular system is vital in allowing contractions to happen, it plays a huge role in almost any sport, as contractions are always needed, despite the intensity. Football is a great example of this, as different motor units are recruited for different contractions that need to happen, depending on the part of the game and the function that needs to be carried out. For example, as football is a long-lasting sport that consists of constant running, whether to attack or defend, contractions always need to happen, as they are needed for running. Due to this, throughout the game, the brain is constantly relaying messages that travel down through the nervous system to the muscles, causing them to contract. As running does not need a powerful contraction, but instead multiple small contractions, it's likely slow oxidative motor units are being recruited for this job, as they have the most fatigue-resistant units and do not provide a very powerful contraction. During other parts of the game, however, like tackling or striking the ball, need stronger contractions for more power to either speed up the shot or win the challenge. Up until the motor unit, the system will work similarly to running, however the stimulus will likely be the ball coming towards the player. It will differ at the motor units, as due to the more powerful contraction being required, it is likely it will recruit fast fatigue-resistant motor units, or fast glycolytic, most likely the latter, as despite it being fatigable, it will provide the largest contraction, and therefore the most powerful kick, and this is only a short period of time, so the fatigue doesn't matter anyway. Furthermore, as it is a kick, the muscle will be stretched, which will be detected by the muscle spindle apparatus, and will send an impulse to the brain, which will be relayed, causing the quadricep to contract, and therefore the hamstring to relax, so it doesn't tear. Fast fatigue-resistant units will likely be used in a sprint, as they won't fatigue, but fairly powerful contractions are needed to reach the ball.